Glad to see you back for more. And if it's your first time, stay tuned for facts, action, insight, and a smoke flavor-filled podcast. It's All Day with JJ. Let's get into it. Bam! Let's have a conversation today, everybody. Appreciate you checking in yet again for, weekly Wednesdays here on the AWJJ podcast, where we talk sports, we discuss things, we talk about different opinions, some that you might have a disagreement with, some that you might actually like the insight or like the hot takes on. Going forward, man, I kind of want to just make these more so conversation style. One of my players that actually plays for me at LCS, shout out to Lil Pat, man, kind of said that, make these more interactive with the people who are listening and viewing. So with that being said, if I ask questions sometimes throughout this episode, take some time and ponder on them. If you actually want to respond, don't hesitate to drop a comment or just give me a call or even just let me know, your thoughts on that. So without further ado, man, let's go ahead and jump into the college play from this past weekend, specifically the SEC. Shout out to my LSU Tigers for actually putting a butt whipping on the Mississippi State Cowbells finally, and beating those boys 41-14. Jaden Daniels coming out with a QBR of 95.3, throwing for about 361 yards, 30 completions on about 34 total passes, with also an attachment of about 64 rushing yards. This kid's starting to come along, man, especially after that Florida State loss. Shout out to Neighbors, his number one receiver for this past weekend with 13 receptions, 239 yards. And also shout out to the LSU defensive secondary as well as the defensive line. The defensive line coming up with about 4 sacks on quarterback Will Rodgers for the Mississippi State Cowbells. And also shout out to the defensive secondary, who I gave a lot of flack to, man, in that first game against Florida State. They actually only allowed a total of 107 passing yards, which to me deserves definitely a little bit of light shed. Also, Caleb Jackson, number 28, running back, freshman, 6 feet, 225. He only got 5 carries for 41 yards, but everybody who's an SEC fan, everybody who's a Tigers fan, be on the lookout for this kid in the years to come. If he becomes a household name, I just want to say I told you so in this episode. Moving on in the SEC play, man, we had 2 major upsets. Missouri coming back and beating Kansas State, number 15, 30-27. Missouri trying to showcase their name as being one of those teams to, you can't necessarily look after or look over as being a cakewalk or making them a homecoming team. Shout out to Missouri, man. Shout out to Florida for beating number 11 ranked Tennessee 29-16. For those of you who don't follow any sports platforms or things like Barstool, there actually ended up being a little bit of a square off between 2 players, one from Florida and one from Tennessee, as if they were playing some park ball back in the day, kind of in the streets. They kind of squared up against one another, which was kind of funny. But one of the big games that I actually want to chime into, this Georgia versus South Carolina game. We are in Georgia, which means I do encounter a lot of Georgia fans. And you know what? I just want to ask all the viewers who are Georgia fans specifically, do you think y'all actually have a chance of being a national champion this year? Do you think y'all actually have the chance of being three-peat champions? I hinted at this last week in my last episode for those of you who haven't listened. So if you haven't, please go in and listen into that. But the quarterback play by Carson Beck was a little bit questionable in the first half. I mean, he did have a total of 269 yards, 27 passes for, or 27 completions after 35 passes. But in that first half, he looked a little bit shaky. TJ Sanders, number 90 for the South Carolina Gamecocks, showed up big, and I think he might be showing up in Carson Beck's dreams as well. Spencer Rattler, on the other hand, the opposing quarterback for the South Carolina Gamecocks, QB transfer from OU, 22 of 42 for 256 yards, but he did throw 2 costly interceptions that I do think brought Georgia back into the game. Kirby Smart, head coach for the Georgia Bulldogs, came out and said, going into that halftime, I believe the Gamecocks were down by 11, or not the Gamecocks, the Bulldogs were down by 11. He actually said, you know what, I was excited because I wanted to see how my team would respond to adversity. I guess if you're a head coach, that's exactly what you're supposed to say, especially to the press when they're asking questions after the game. But I don't know. I mean, I think you might need to start raising a couple question marks, especially when SEC play starts to get underway. Woodring, the kicker, 3 of 6 on the year, actually with 2 misses inside 30 yards. Man, I'm actually kind of surprised because the Georgia specialists, the kickers in general, have normally been pretty stout when you look at the past history as far as Georgia kickers, Georgia punters. But the one thing that I can say about the Georgia Bulldogs that actually might help y'all is the running back room. Y'all have always had solid running backs, even dating back to the Todd Gurley, Nick Chubb days. Dejon Edwards had 20 carries for 118 yards, which is, I think, the real reason why Carson Beck was able to recompose himself and get back more and so in the pocket and make more passes. But Georgia Bulldogs, it's time to start raising a couple questions early on if we're looking at these tight games, only being able to beat South Carolina 24-14, going into halftime with an 11-point deficit. In other college news, Colorado versus Colorado State. I know all you sports fans have definitely been seeing a lot of Colorado media, especially a lot of media surrounding the most infamous primetime head coach Deion Sanders. They had a very close game against Colorado State, actually going into 2 overtimes. Quarterback Shedeur Sanders, son of Deion, actually showcased another very well played game with 348 yards, 4 TDs, but also throwing his first interception. The reason I want to shout out Shedeur Sanders, though, is because at the end of the game, he basically drove the Colorado Buffalo down the field. I want to say a total of 90 yards on the game tying drive, and then on top of that converted a 2-point conversion and got on the mic post interview and said he just went Brady mode. Shout out to Shedeur Sanders. I think on some of the latest NFL prospects rankings, I think he's ranked number 3 as far as quarterbacks as a junior at Colorado, which deserves a lot of respect in my opinion. Also, give shout out to the other Sanders kid, Shiloh Sanders, having his first interception, returning it for 80 yards against the Colorado State opposing enemy team rivalry early in that first quarter against the quarterback Fowler Nikolai, I think is his name. Please forgive me if I'm pronouncing that incorrectly. He's also only a freshman, the Colorado State quarterback, and he still came out, although he had 3 interceptions, showcased that he has a lot of talent. I mean, he's a Texas kid. I think he's out of Aledo. And then the other big name coming from Colorado, man, Travis Hunter. For those of you who didn't see the game, Henry Blackburn, number 11, the safety for Colorado State, came and hit Travis Hunter kind of on a late hit. And from what I've seen on blogs and different things, I heard Skip Bayless say that I think Travis Hunter might be out for 3 to 4 weeks with a lacerated liver, which honestly might not be good for Colorado considering the fact that they are getting ready to play a lot of major Pac-12 teams as this Pac-12 play gets underway. They're getting ready to face guys like Oregon, guys like USC, who are both top 15 teams. And one of my buddies, shout out to Abir Kareem, actually told me, he said, watching this past week's game, the hype surrounding Colorado is there, but I don't know, there's starting to arise some question marks. Last week we talked about how Colorado might actually be or end up being a ceiling 9-3 team or floor 7-5 team. Shout out to my buddy P. Davis again. But after this last close game, there are a lot of questions surrounding that Colorado football program, and Deion might respond with "Do you believe?" And I'll just like to say this: they came out with a win. They came out with a dub on College Game Day. Both of his sons showcased great ability, but one of their marquee players, Travis Hunter, who might be out for 3 to 4 weeks, could be a big question mark for the Colorado Buffs. Moving on from college play, moving into the NFL. This is kind of where I actually wanted to jump into having a conversation with the listeners and viewers. Last week, I actually was unable to comment on the Jets quarterback situation. For those of you who do not know, Aaron Rodgers only got a total of 4 snaps. There are a lot of memes and things like that saying that Aaron Rodgers played more so just carrying the flag out on the field rather than actually in the actual game. Ruptured Achilles, bro. Zach Wilson had to step up as the backup, who was the Jets quarterback last year. Was a first-round draft pick who didn't really necessarily pan out on behalf of Jets fans. But the big question that I want to ask everybody listening in, Aaron Rodgers has came out and said that he's going to try to be back by playoffs. That's in about 4 to 5 months. And most ruptured Achilles, a lot of major players don't come back until 8 to 12 months. I mean, you look at Kobe Bryant. I think Kobe might have came back in, I think, 8 or after 8 or 9 months, but he was also in supreme condition. Aaron Rodgers doesn't look like he's in the best condition. I mean, Tom Brady looks like he's in better condition when he was being recognized by the New England Patriots just running out at halftime. So for those of you listening and viewing, do you think Aaron Rodgers can actually be back by playoff berth? if they even make the playoffs. In all honesty, if he is, I think it's because he's doing some crazy ayahuasca treatment. Go look into that if you don't know what that is, or because Dr. Joe Rogan is actually giving him something that no other human knows of. But I don't know if he's going to be back. I think he's 39 years of age, getting ready to be 40. I think the oldest player in the NFL right now is only 41. So if he does come back by playoff berth, that would be super shocking to me. In other NFL news, starting with the Thursday night game from last week, Philadelphia versus Minnesota. 3 fumbles in the first quarter, man, which is actually quite surprising. Jalen Hurts going deep to Devontae Smith. Later throws a pick in the game. The Philadelphia Eagles, although they were last year's runner-ups, man, there's somewhat some question marks surrounding them as well. You know, they're getting these very close wins. First week they had the Patriots, only beat them by 5. I think last week they had Minnesota, they only beat them by 6. Now questions are starting to surround the NFL secondary for the Philadelphia Eagles. Are the Philadelphia Eagles the same team that we thought they were last year? I mean, they've got basically all the same amount of pieces, but starting to see a little bit of a breakup early on. I mean, Georgia's back. DeAndre Swift showcasing great vision ability and run game ability with hella stats. Shout out to the Georgia running back room, as I said earlier. DeAndre Swift might actually be a key piece to that offense that will allow Jalen Hurts to get back more into his, the flow of things. We're getting guys like Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown back involved. Moving on into the Atlanta versus the Green Bay Packers game. Jordan Love stepping up, using his legs, but later on in the game having to face, a Desmond Ridder who actually some might say might not be the most prototypical quarterback, but doing his job. Atlanta getting a tight dub right there at the end. Jordan Love having to step up and try to produce a game-winning drive and being unsuccessful. AJ, man, might be one of the number 1 cornerbacks to look out for. Shout out to the Atlanta Falcons defense. Atlanta has had a lot of shaky years. Starting off 2-0, I might have to say, you know what? Shout out to the Atlanta Falcons. You guys actually might have a chance at winning your division. Looking at the other notable teams in that division, the Saints, the Carolina Panthers, and the Buccaneers. I mean, the Buccaneers still looking pretty nasty with blue-collar quarterback Baker Mayfield, as I said last week. Carolina still looking a little shaky. We'll get to see more and more of what they look like tonight against the Saints with the quarterback Bryce Young. But Atlanta, man, I got to give y'all some credibility. You got to give credit where credit is due. Desmond Ridder might not be the best quarterback for y'all, but he is definitely winning the games for you guys. Shout out to the Atlanta Falcons. Moving on to the Kansas City versus Jacksonville Jags game. Patrick Mahomes actually turned 28 on last Sunday, so he actually had the opportunity to play on his birthday. But he actually took somewhat of a lot of hits, took a couple shots deep, threw some interceptions. But the main question that I want to bring up is the Jacksonville Jaguars. Although it's only week 2, where is Trevor Lawrence and the Calvin Ridley connection? Calvin Ridley had a pretty big catch, kind of, I want to say, in the third or fourth quarter, kind of in that game. But where is Trevor Lawrence? Some people were trying to say that this might be the Trevor Lawrence MVP year. By the way he's been playing, I really don't know. Although it is week 2, and we do have another 15 to 16 weeks left to actually showcase gameplay. These are some of the questions that you start to think about when you look at MVP seasons, quarterbacks in the top 10. Speaking of MVP seasons, let's go ahead and bring it back to the Jets and look into the Dallas Cowboys play from this past week. Micah Parsons is showcasing why he definitely might deserve to be the Defensive Player of the Year this year, as well as even an MVP conversation. I don't think we've seen a defensive MVP in the NFL within the past 20-something odd years. Aaron Donald, TJ Watt being some of those guys who have actually been brought into question as being the closest to being NFL MVPs. But Micah Parsons, man, looking like a dominant force. That defense in general, you see the Cowboys playing a lot of man coverage with a lot of cover one. We actually got hit by Garrett Wilson, the Jets' number 1 receiver, kind of late in the I want to say, was that late in the second or third quarter. Gilmore was lined up, matched up on him a lot, man-to-man coverage. But the thing with this cover one that you play, especially in the NFL, your cover 1 safety, who's the only guy who's up high, who's by himself, probably 12 to 15 yards off the ball, he's got to realize that he's the last line of defense. And he actually, for the last week for the Cowboys, I don't remember the young man's name. I want to say it was number 26. He actually got caught up in the coverage scheme, bit on Garrett Wilson's deep post, deep crossing route, and actually missed the tackle, which would allow the Jets to score that touchdown. Opposing teams are going to take a look at that and say, all right, this defense is actually somewhat crazy, but if we're able to get a deep ball on the defense, we might be able to score. I really don't see that happening with that defensive line being so stout, as well as that inside those inside linebacker core. But speaking of the inside linebacking core, the number one weakness that I actually want to say that the Dallas Cowboys might have is Leighton Vander Esch. I might catch some flack for this because I know there are a lot of Cowboys fans who are big Vander Esch fans. But in all honesty, when you look at a football realm of things, right, you look at an offensive line, you got a center, you got a right guard and a left guard. In between the center and the guard are the two A gaps. And then after the right guard and the left guard, you got a right tackle and a left tackle. In between the right tackle and the right guard, you got the B gap, right? The A, the B, and the C gaps. I honestly don't think that Leighton Vander Esch can cover anything or anybody outside of the B gaps. Breece Hall got around him, one of the running backs for the New York Jets, as well as Zach Wilson. We did see the Cowboys kind of losing some of their defensive fundamentals after blitzing. Zach Wilson was able to step up in the pocket and penetrate some wide open holes that Leighton Vander Esch was unable to grab him in. So looking at the Dallas defense, those are some of the question marks for those Dallas fans listening in. Turning it over to the offense, I still want to come on here and say that our red zone run game is not officially there. Tony Pollard just now had finally a breakout game. CeeDee Lamb being CeeDee Lamb, Mike McCarthy showcasing his play calling ability, lining CeeDee Lamb up in the slot, outside, bringing him in motion, doing a lot of different things, giving him the ball, not giving him the ball. Dak Prescott had probably one of the most efficient first halves that he's ever put together in his entire career, but I'm still questionable on Dak's decision making. CeeDee Lamb had a great game, but we all know that CeeDee Lamb is, of course, his number one target. We saw Dak had a little bit of a tunnel vision kind of there early in the game. Sauce Gardner almost getting a pick six on the Cowboys. Luckily, he dropped the catch. But Dak, still a little bit questionable with his decision making, but I appreciate him being efficient with the ball and guys like CeeDee Lamb not being afraid to go up and grab it. Other key notes from that team, from what we saw with the Dallas Cowboys, Deuce Vaughn actually getting a little bit of a showcasing with his ability to be able to, line up in the screen pass and get out and be kind of a little scat back, hard to see. Shout out to the Dallas Cowboys. Shout out to us being potentially a juggernaut. Looking into some other notable teams, I want to bring it back to the Ravens, man. I don't think a lot of people realize how much offensive weaponry the Ravens truly have. You have Lamar Jackson, a former league MVP. But if you want to look at this receiving cast, Odell Beckham already has so much media surrounding him, but a lot of people are saying that this is Odell's truly last chance for him to showcase that he's still talented. He had 3 receptions in the first half. There were 3 key receptions. He ended up going down with a little ankle injury. Nelson Aguilar, a lot of people wanted to count this kid out, but this kid is showcasing that he can still play in the NFL just as well as any other major receiver. And then you've also got the addition of Zay Flowers from Boston College. Shouted this kid out last week. I think this kid is going to be one of the most suitable joystick of slot receivers in the game. You've also got other guys like Duvernay, Gus Edwards, but also let's not forget now, they still have Mark Andrews, which I think is a top 5 tight end in the NFL. This Ravens offensive weaponry is honestly in the top 5, second to probably the Cowboys, or third probably to the San Francisco 49ers. Let's not keep out this Ravens team. They actually went in there, beat Cincinnati, who is 0-2 with the infamous Joe Burrow as well as the infamous Jamar Chase. For those fantasy picks, fantasy guys, fantasy owners, Joe Burrow, although he's 0-2, man, you got to give him a chance. There's still a lot of season left. Like I said, I think there's still 16 games or 16 weeks left in this NFL season. So we're still seeing some hardship from certain teams. Even Kansas City, Patrick Mahomes, like I said earlier, was experiencing some hardships on his birthday, throwing some deep picks. Random fact, Indianapolis Colts, Anthony Richardson from Florida going down with a concussion. Famous backup quarterback Gardner Minshew now gets to show up again, yet again. He already showcased his abilities with the Philadelphia Eagles of being a great player. Some people might have thought that he should have had an even bigger chance of being a starter here in Indianapolis because they feel like he might be a week in, a week out starter. Well, to all those fans, here's the Gardner Minshew show. You get another chance. Anthony Richardson goes down against Houston with a concussion. CJ Stroud showcasing that he might be having a little bit of a trouble in that organization. Caleb Williams, one of the big quarterbacks in college football right now, specifically for the USC Trojans. His father actually came out and said, look, Caleb can and is eligible as a junior to go to the NFL draft, but I actually might want him to come back if he goes to one of those terrible organizations as if a first-round draft pick would normally go to. I don't think his father is actually going to withhold him from going to the NFL, but when you look at those terrible organizations, I mean, C.J. Stroud is kind of having a little bit of a struggle with the Houston Texans. All in all, man, the NFL is yet again showcasing a lot of wonderful games to be on the lookout for. I mean, the San Francisco 49ers had a blowout win in the first week against the Pittsburgh Steelers, but last week against the Rams, they went into halftime 17-17. So somewhat questionable play from the 49ers. Shout out to my boy Dejan. I know he's a big 49ers fan. I think we faced the 49ers, the Cowboys, on week 5, and I honestly think that the Cowboys have the 49ers number this year. Moving on into other sports, other rapid news. For all of you who just kind of want to know about rapid news, I'm going to start bringing in this rapid news every week to kind of give insight on other notable sports going on besides the NFL and besides college football. Forgot to shout this out this previous week. Adesanya losing to Strickland in the UFC. Some people want to say Adesanya didn't look like his regular self. I don't know if the Stylebender truly was prepared to fight Strickland. I don't even know if the Stylebender truly wanted to win this match. Take that down for all UFC fighters looking to get my boy Rob on here to chop up UFC specifically. Moving on into the boxing world. Canelo Alvarez versus Jermell Charlo, September 30th. Charlo is one of the few undisputed boxers still left in the game, and he's facing Canelo Alvarez, truly a Hall of Famer who popped up onto the scene when he first lost to Floyd Mayweather back in the early 2000 teens. Should be a big fight. Looking to get my boy Farrell Fresh on here to chop up the boxing segment as well. And we got a big fight coming in with Johnny Bones Jones getting ready to fight again. I want to say on November 11th, another UFC matchup. Looking into the Major League Baseball power rankings, considering the fact that October is right around the corner, I think there are only about 10 to 12 games left in Major League Baseball. The Braves are, of course, sitting at number 1 with 96 and 53, 96 wins, 53 losses. The Rangers, another notable team that I love, they're sitting at number 7. The Dodgers are sitting at number 4, and the Astros are sitting at number 5. Just wanted to bring those 4 teams in because I feel like those are the 4 Major League Baseball teams that have a lot of major big fan bases besides, like, you know, the historical ones like the Yankees and the Red Sox, but nobody cares about those people. Speaking of the Yankees and the Red Sox are actually arguably in conversations for being one of the teams that Shohei Ohtani, one of the big players still in Major League Baseball, who is looking to leave his current team, the Los Angeles Angels, the Anaheim Angels, whichever one you want to call them. The Boston Red Sox are looking at being one of those number 1 teams in conversation to pick up Shohei Ohtani. There's a lot of news going around this guy. He actually apparently cleaned out his locker last week. He's also been put on the DL or the IL injured list because of an oblique injury and is expected to get surgery on his UCL, the elbow, his right arm pretty soon. So a lot of questions surrounding if Ohtani's career is pretty much over in the Los Angeles or Anaheim Angels organization. Some of the notable teams that, you know, might have insight on interest on getting him, as said earlier, the Boston Red Sox, the Dodgers, the Baltimore Orioles, and then the Seattle Mariners. He also came out and said that he specifically would love to play for the Mariners organization, and I would probably say that's because of the past Japanese connection with Ichiro Suzuki. But the Mariners, man, speaking of the Mariners, let's look into that AL West because I am from Texas. I am a Texas Ranger. The Rangers are 1.5 games back from the Astros, and the Mariners are right below them at 2.5 games back from the Astros. The wild card race and the pennant race is actually going to be very wicked when you look at the latter part of this September going into October, playoff October time for the Major League Baseball. So, all you baseball lovers, be tuned in. Be ready to come in for another segment on specifically baseball, kind of like I shouted out in my last episode, because we are about to start off in playoff October. There's going to be a lot of exciting things. Can the Braves pull it off yet again, dating back to their past World Series about I want to say 2 years ago, back in 2021. Other shout outs to my dogs, man. Shout out to my buddy Gilbo. Shout out to my dog T Scott, DeCarlo Scott. He's going to be giving his insight on the Saints, considering the fact that he is a Saints fan here in the next few weeks. So I will be dropping that in here for all of you New Orleans, Baton Rouge people who are Saints fans. Who dat? Shout out to Hank Williams, man, one of my former classmates, one of my buddies. dating back to the Marksman days at St. Mark's. Appreciate you for tuning in, bro. We love you on the AWJJ podcast. And shout out to my former manager, Neil Mock, man, wanting me to get into the Alaskan sled racing as far as other sports to bring onto this platform podcast. Some of the questions that I just want to ask you guys. When you look at your specific teams, whether it's baseball, football, basketball, or whatever it is, what do you think as a fan is your number one weakness or your team's number one weakness? For example, I think the Cowboys' number one weakness right now is probably the running back room, to give you insight. Or if you're a Georgia's fan, I think the number one weakness for the Georgia team is either the quarterback or the kicking play, right? As a fan of your specific team, what do you think is your number one weakness for your specific team? And I know I was talking, shout out to my buddy Hank Williams. I was going to give this week's NFL picks, but to be completely honest, man, there's still a lot that I still need to see. We're coming up on week 3, so next week, stay tuned for this NFL's weekly picks or next week's NFL's weekly picks. Also, don't forget to think about what you think your team's biggest weaknesses are. Drop those in the comments, man. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. And as well, do you think Aaron Rodgers can actually come back from a ruptured Achilles within 5 to 6 months or 4 to 5 months when you look at the playoff timeline for the NFL? All in all, man, I appreciate everybody for chiming in, tuning in, and appreciate you guys for listening, bro. I would love to hear more insight on things to come. I got a special guest coming to you next week, an Atlanta native that we're going to also chop up about sports. I want to continuously bring on more guests, bring on more insight, have more opinionated discussions, and I also want to have more people who want to talk trash. I want to have bragging rights issued here and there and all that. All that being said, man, thank you for coming on. We love you. We'd love to discuss more information with you. And all in all, stay blessed, stay peaced up, and stay safe.